All right, today we are diving deep into the messy, fascinating, and, let's be honest, often contradictory world of Southeast Asian diplomacy. And we're going to zero in on Malaysia's really unique spot within its regional family, ASEAN.
So what's the deal here? Are its neighbors loyal, ride-or-die siblings? Or are they cunning rivals just waiting for a chance to get ahead? Well, as you're about to see, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. In fact, that very tension, that's what defines pretty much everything about Malaysia's foreign policy.
You know, one source put it perfectly. They said the ASEAN family is less like some happy-go-lucky sitcom and way more like a high-stakes family drama. You know, just with much better fashion. And honestly, it's the perfect way to think about it. This is a region built on both shared blood and, well, some very carefully managed suspicion.
So picture this. An ASEAN summit is basically a mandatory family dinner. You've got the handshakes, the big smiles for the camera, and these traditional gift baskets that are really just unspoken non-aggression pacts. Everyone's on their absolute best behavior, but you can just feel the history and all the unspoken issues hanging in the air.
Exactly. Because under that glossy surface, those smiles are doing a lot of heavy lifting. They're hiding some very real tension. It's this whole performance of unity that's basically just papering over decades of little arguments, simmering rivalries, and that constant tug-of-war between what's good for the country and what's good for the region. Okay, so to really get what's going on, you've got to meet the key players in our little family drama: Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. Their personalities, their histories. That's what makes this whole relationship so incredibly complex.
First, let's talk about Malaysia. It is the classic middle child. Super pragmatic, always ambitious, and kind of stuck between two very different, very powerful siblings. So a lot of the time it has to be the peacemaker, the broker. But don't get it twisted. Malaysia will always fiercely defend its own turf. It's a constant tightrope walk.
And then you've got Singapore, the hyper-successful younger sibling. After their messy breakup back in '65, it just became this powerhouse of efficiency. Everything is precise, legalistic, and, yeah, a little passive-aggressive. As one leaked cable brilliantly put it, Singapore is like that friend who brings a calculator to a potluck. And that creates this really unique, codependent tension, especially with Malaysia. And finally, rounding out the trio is the big brother, Indonesia. A charismatic giant that can be both a source of deep shared culture for Malaysia and also a source of massive headaches. Their whole relationship is built on this idea of being serumpun, from the same root. But it's a bond that's constantly being tested by some messy, recurring fights, like, when its forest fires literally set the entire region's backyard on fire.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. It's how these family squabbles actually go down. They are absolute masterclasses in passive aggression and ritualized conflict, and they tell you everything you need to know about these relationships.
Let's start with the longest-running soap opera between Malaysia and Singapore, the water dispute. And trust me, this is less about actual water and way more about high-stakes emotional leverage. And it's been going on for over 60 years.
So get this, an agreement from 1962 locks in the price for raw water sold to Singapore at a ridiculously low 3 sen per 1,000 gallons. Then, Singapore treats that water and sells some of it back for 50 sen. You can imagine this fuels just endless political posturing and debate.
Just to put that number in perspective for you, 3 sen is roughly the cost of a single ice cube for your coffee. So yeah, this isn't really about the money. It's about symbolism, it's about leverage, and it's about this national angst that has defined their relationship for decades. Singapore sees a legally binding contract, Malaysia sees a relic of the colonial era. So while the water wars define the Malaysia-Singapore dynamic, the annual transboundary haze is the ritual that really tests the bond between Malaysia and its big brother Indonesia. And it's an equally predictable and equally frustrating cycle every single year.
Malaysia's response is so scripted it's practically performance art. Step 1, send some firefighters to help out. Step 2, hold some high-level meetings, but, in a place safely upwind from the smoke. And Step 3, update the regional haze agreement with what basically amounts to a diplomatic pinky swear. It's a performance that lets everyone vent without ever forcing a really uncomfortable real confrontation.
So you're probably thinking, with all this fighting, all this drama, why doesn't this family just break up? Well, it turns out there are two overwhelmingly powerful reasons that just hold them all together.
First off, the family business is booming. Their economies are so deeply tangled up. We're talking supply chains, labor, investment, the whole shebang, that a real split is just unthinkable. The cost would be absolutely catastrophic for everybody. So for better or for worse, they're stuck with each other. And the second big reason?
Well, it's that giant, uninvited neighbor who's always kind of peering over the fence, China. Beijing's assertiveness, especially in the South China Sea, gives all the siblings a very powerful reason to keep their squabbles in-house and try to present a somewhat unified front to the rest of the world.
So here's the crucial point. This isn't just some simple contradiction. This dynamic of being both a brother and a rival, it's a really complex, deliberate system. It's the very soul of how things get done in the region. It's often called the ASEAN way.
One source coined the absolute perfect term for this: catapot diplomacy. Now, a catapot is a rice cake that's packed into a woven leaf pouch. And the metaphor is just chef's kiss. You weave this fragile container of agreements, you fill it with the good stuff, economic prosperity, and then you cook the whole thing under the intense pressure of nationalism. It holds together, sure, but it's delicate. It can go bad really easily if you're not paying attention.
And that right there, that gets to the absolute core of this whole thing. For Malaysia, this constant back and forth between blood brother and backstabber, it isn't a flaw in its foreign policy. It is the foreign policy. It's a calculated, pragmatic way to survive in a very, very complicated neighborhood.
As senior Malaysian diplomat, speaking off the record, summed it all up perfectly. There's this pragmatic, almost cynical acceptance of what each country is at its core. The strategy isn't to try and change them, but to manage the reality of who they are, all while keeping Malaysia positioned right in the middle of it all.
Which leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. In a region this complex, maybe what looks like dysfunction is actually a kind of stability. Maybe in the messy world of geopolitics, carefully managed suspicion isn't a sign that something is broken. Maybe it's just another name for peace.